Hello. So today, danglers, right? If you look this up in Fowler, our entry is unattached participle or participles. Also, we call them dangling participles. Birchfield tells us that some people call them dangling, hanging, misrelated participles, unattached participles, danglers. So they have many, many names, right? What are they? Dangling participles are not considered correct. In the sentence, while walking home, my phone rang, walking is a dangling participle. What does it mean? Why do we say that? Because the subject of the main sentence, which is my phone rang, does not coincide with the subject, sorry, of the clause while walking. It's not the same person. Walking and ringing, sorry, walking and ringing don't have the same subject. A better version would be, well, I was walking home, my phone rang. So I have a subject here, right? What we need to say about danglers is that they seldom lead to ambiguity. Usually we understand. The thing is that they jar, right? They clash, they become confusing, right? Fowler gives you many examples. The first one I would like to go over the first one. Dear sir, we beg to enclose herewith statement of your account for goods supplied, and being desirous of clearing our books to end mail, will you kindly favor us with check in settlement, blah 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 blah. What is wrong here? Being desirous of clearing our books is the publishing house. They are desirous. But the subject that follows is you, right? So apparently you, Fowler, would be desirous of clearing the books. And his response was, sir, you have been misinformed. I have no wish to clear your books. Okay, he was playing with them, right? Then he quotes another person, it doesn't matter, Lord Whitelaw. He said, being unique, I'm not going in any way to imitate him. And what Fowler says is, well, he didn't, sorry, Birchfield says, he didn't mean to say that he was unique, right? Because when you say being unique, I am unique, right? The subject of being unique is the same subject of the main sentence. Um, the next one is even clearer. After inspecting a guard of honor, President Reagan's motorcade moved, blah, blah, blah. So it's the motorcade, so the long line of cars, that inspected the guard of honor, right? So that doesn't make any sense, right? Now, it's not ing forms only. It may be past participles. Now, demolished, I can call it to mind. Does that mean that the person who's speaking is demolished? Not really, right? It's a place, right, that has been demolished. And well, what Birchfield goes on to say is that this is not restricted to unscripted speech. That is to say, when it's not just when you don't know what you're saying, or you're speaking off the cuff, or just speaking. This happens on other occasions. Before we move on, I want to take you to the Guardian entry about the dangling participles or hanging participles. And the example, standard example is, having died, they buried him. So they died, right? After he died, they buried him, if is what you want, right? And then they go on to explain, provide other examples. Dreary, repetitive, and well past the sell-by date, I switched off the new series of Fleming Faces, so a TV show, right? So dreary, repetitive, and well past the sell-by date are all adjectives to describe Flaming Faces, not I, but given the position, they describe I. So it is the person who's speaking who is dreary, repetitive, and well past his or her sell-by date. Another example, due out in January, so to be published in January as a white paper, Ms. Kelly may be unable to overcome Mr. Blair's apparent determination to stick with A levels. Well, this is a complex text. I just wanted to share here also the question of a white paper, but it's Ms. Kelly, who is out in January, not the paper, right? A white paper, by the way, you can see I have looked it up already, is a document that explains, went to the, sorry, my bad. So it's a report, right, that gives information about government decisions, right, before a law is introduced. And there's a green paper, which is a document containing government proposals on a subject, right? And this gives you an idea of why we use the word green, because it gives you the idea of something that is not just the color of grass, covered with grass, but not ready yet, right? And then in politics, well, in politics it's different, right? It means supporting the environment, but also a person, right? Young and without experience, right? Okay, so going back to the Guardian, the other example, well, you can pay attention to the other example on your own. You can stop the video, and then we'll go back to Fowler. After Birchfield, he says that Fowler also talked about marginal prepositions, right? And he gives us examples like talking of test matches, considering the circumstances, roughly speaking, assuming, knowing my mother, speaking of money, and so on and so forth. All these expressions do not fall under the category of a dangler, right? Because, I'm going to go here now, because they are kind of marginal prepositions, right? So when you say talking of test matches, who won, this talking of is perceived as a preposition. So we're not thinking about the subject of who was talking, who was considering, or who was roughly speaking, right? So in these cases, the question of a dangler does not simply apply. And the same goes for other marginal prepositions, like based on this assumption. The economy is, it's not that the economy is based in the assumption, right? The subject is not the same and it's not wrong. Considering the conditions, maybe the speaker, the horses galloped well, right? Considering how much you've done for her, which is taken into account, I should think. So different subject, no problem. Given her ambitions, he didn't disagree. Given how busy they were, it's a wonder they noticed. Granted his initial assumptions, I think it stands the test, and judging by what happened on Monday, the courts can now block the entrance, or judging from the review, the performance was excellent. I insist the point is that in this case, the subject, the performance, doesn't have to be the subject of the ing form or the participial, like given or granted, the past participle. All of these examples are taken from Birchfield, right? You see here at the end of this paragraph, he provides other other phrases that are marginal prepositions. So they're not really prepositions as such, but they're kind of prepositions. And then he goes on to talk about other words like barring, accepting, owing to. And I know you know all these words. You wouldn't have any problem understanding them, except for barring. Barring is rarely seen as a preposition, but it is, and that's very dangerous, to be frank, right? I keep going to the wrong side, sorry. Yeah, I'm not supporting that. You know, I could use ad block, but honestly, it doesn't really help. Barring. Sorry. Barring is a preposition, except for unless there is or there are. Barring accidents, so if there aren't any accidents, we should arrive on time. Barring could be a noun and a preposition. Barring. What does it mean? Excluding by exception. Barring a miracle, they would never be able to save the large cash outlay required, whatever, excepting if there isn't a miracle, right? Now, I'm going to take you to this quote because I think it is very important. So we're going to read this together. In Latin America, growth came to a standstill, and poverty increased by 8 million people as a result of the crisis. So there was a crisis, right? And the result was poverty increasing, right? And the fact that growth came to a standstill. Next sentence. But There was no economic and social meltdown thanks to progress over the previous decade on macroeconomic management and smarter social policies. So what they're saying is, okay, yes, there was a crisis, there was a consequence to the crisis, but there weren't bigger consequences because we had done something in it before, and that covered us. The next sentence goes, barring further external shocks. So further means another one, another what? Another crisis. An external shock is clearly a synonym for crisis. Barring further external shocks, the region is now well positioned to enter a path of fast and sustained development, right? So what this means is if there aren't any more external shocks, right? Look at the translation, which is not good in any way, but this question of the barring is unacceptable. En la América Latina el crecimiento se estancó y la pobreza aumentó alrededor de 8 millones de personas más, no importa, como consecuencia de la crisis. No es una bella traducción. Pero no se produjo una debacle social ni económica gracias a los avances de la década anterior en materia de gestión macroeconómica y políticas sociales más inteligentes. Ahora bien, tras bloquear el paso a mayores conmociones externas, ¿de qué estamos hablando? The person translated bar as a verb. To bar, to stop further external shocks. Barring is a preposition and it means accepting. Es decir, si no se producen otras conmociones externas, la región está bien posicionada. Bueno, el resto es horrible, pero no importa. Remember, barring is a preposition, right? So I think this entry is very important, not just because of, not least because, or not just because, that's okay, of the danglers, but also because of this preposition barring, right? You can check many other examples for these, for danglers, right? I think another one we have not seen is this one. The sun came out. So this is another very good example of a bad sentence, right? Because somebody else was arriving at the station when the sun came out, right? So the sun is not the subject of arriving, and it should be, yes, the subject of this. Because of that, it is dangling, right? Because the subject of the clause does not coincide with the subject of the main sentence, the subordinate clause, right? So you could say, arriving at the station, she picked up something, right? Okay, I think I have all the examples. You can still check out many more examples online. Thank you very much. That is all.